um, impact on mass incarceration and how we feel about the death penalty. I am Kenny Robinson, and I am the founder and executive director of Freedom Fighting Missionaries, which is an organization that I founded in 2020. The organization and the work is based off of my own lived experience, having served 10 years in federal prison and released to Charlotte, Mecklenburg area, which was very unique to the issue of upward mobility and systemic racism. I am originally from Hempstead, New York, and my family on my father's side is from here in North Carolina, where I spent the most of my time growing up in the Mount Airy, Winston-Salem area, and decided to relocate to Charlotte, where some of my family members had relocated once I was released. Um, and I came to Charlotte under the false impression that because this was the largest city in North Carolina, that there'd be an opportunity for me to at least work in a warehouse, dig a ditch, do the kind of menial jobs that were available to um, those who are formerly incarcerated, specifically being Black with limited education and job skills or training. So I had very high hopes. It did not work out that way. This was in 2012. So the a short synopsis is that I went on 40 job interviews and got told no 40 times in a row before I got my first job working at Goodwill. And I had tried over a dozen different nonprofit organizations seeking help and assistance. And it just wasn't nothing, specific to the issues of those who are formerly incarcerated. I continued to press on and beg my way into a car dealership where I quickly became a top salesperson, and I credit me being able to do those things because once I started working there, I had access to the internet. I had a computer, and I was able to learn that way from a computer. So I took that experience, being promoted up to a finance manager, then a sales manager, which gave me the ability to hire. Once I had that ability, I was calling in people with a background and giving them an opportunity, a chance within the dealerships that I was working in. And I became known in the community for such. So in 2020, I decided to launch my own nonprofit organization, Freedom Fighting Missionaries, with the intent to assist individuals who were facing the same barriers that I once had. As a new organization, being Black-led, being formerly incarcerated, there was little to no assistance available for us up front. You don't qualify for any grants. They want you to be in existence for so long. The application process needs, I guess, somebody who graduated with a doctorate degree to read and understand it. So we were primarily self-funded through fundraising and from the community. In 2020, we was able to assist a little over 100 individuals. We raised around 178,000 that year and developed credibility within the community. As you can see with the partners that are listed there, that came from our hard work and efforts by not only showing the work that we did on paper, but individuals were able to go onto our websites and see the impact that we had. Coming from a sales background, I used that to get to the people at the top of the organizations that we work with. I don't mind calling you 50 times a day. I don't mind sending you 100 emails. I was used to it from sales. And that is one way that we were able to break through to some of the partnerships that we developed, which led to us receiving grant funding for our work from Wells Fargo, the Foundation of Carolinas, and many of the logos that you see there. Eventually, we were able to break through to the government, and about 5 months ago, we were awarded grant funding from Mecklenburg County for $750,000, and we were awarded housing support grant from the City of Charlotte for $297,000. And with our other grants and resources fundraising, we have went from zero in 2020 to close to a $2 million budget with the ability to assist 150 to 175 individuals. With that leading to one of the local churches donating us some land to construct our own housing. So we're in the process of developing 20 townhouses for our clients at 30% AMIs so they can have an opportunity to move forward and become homeowners. That's the short synopsis of our work and how that plays into mass incarceration. We have determined from our own lived experiences and the lives that we have lived that outside of poverty, then the numbers that are clearly skewed in North Carolina prison, 57% of the individuals that are there are Black. So that's 40,000 individuals that's in the state prisons right now. 22,800 of them are Black. And 80% of those individuals identify as coming from low income households, neighborhoods, or born into poverty. So we have determined that even with systemic racism, the biggest factor in that systemic racism as it relates to individuals like myself being able to move forward is poverty. That is an area that we target the most in our program. It's 4 phases. So you have starts with identifications, employment, healthcare, and then finally housing. And that is the pathway that we use in our program to assist individuals that we assist. How that relates to the death penalty, it is the same factor. We do not believe in the death penalty specifically is because it is so lopsided and there's so much systemic racism in it that a large percentage of the individuals that's currently on death row are Black. So right now, according to a report that I read from Robert Law PLLC, of the 159 individuals at that time, 87 of them were Black, and 22% Black population in North Carolina. So mathematically, it's just systemic in its nature. It's easy to tell and impacts one race more than the other. And if to not believe in it for nothing else, that is a good enough reason because it's just simply not fair outside of the other reasons why we don't believe in the death penalty. But that one alone is enough that it should just be stricken down and not even considered. That is the same way that we feel about the current prison system, that it would need to just be tore completely down and rebuilt that is person-centered on an even basis, regardless of poverty and race. That is our beliefs on the prison system, on the policing system, on the sheriff's system, that it is so broken that it is beyond repair and it would just need to be completely tore down and restructured with a model to assist the individuals versus punish them. We do not believe in that anything that's punitive works. There's nothing in the history of this world that suggests that it does anything except for punish and hold a lower class of individual down. That is universal, that is around the world, that most of the people that are incarcerated worldwide are poor. And it had those individuals at least had an opportunity equal to their counterparts, that those numbers would work themselves out. We have again determined that from our lived experience. You take me for an instance. I am working. I have been working for the last 10 years. I'm a homeowner. I have a vehicle that I have to pay a note, insurance, life insurance. So I have things like that. I am not going to leave my home and my job and go out and rob someone. Right? I'm less likely to leave my job and home and go out and kill someone. And it is primarily because I have those things, right? And I don't even have in my mind crime because I'm busy raising a family. I'm busy paying a mortgage and I'm busy, working in my employment. It doesn't take a matter of intelligence with that. It just takes opportunity. And those are our beliefs. I will be open to any questions. I know I tried to give a short synopsis of things, but it has been a lot in the last 2.5 years that I just cannot get it all out in 10 minutes. So thank you very much.
Great, Kenneth. Thank you. There will be plenty of questions, I'm sure. But now let's hear from Noelle.
Thank you so much. My name is Noelle Nickel. I use she, her pronouns. And I just want to say amen, hallelujah. Kenneth, the work that you are doing and that your team is doing in Charlotte is truly inspiring. And I look forward to following along and supporting as best I can, because all that you said about the death penalty is absolutely true. I'm the director of the North Carolina Coalition for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. And for far too long, the death penalty abolition movement in North Carolina in particular, and in other states too, perhaps, has been very siloed. And we have not centered the voices of people most impacted with lived experience. And so we are going about our organizing, we are going about our abolition work in a different way at NCC ADP, and are just, I'm inspired by what you've shared, and am honored to be sharing this time with you. I'm going to put our website in the chat, and you can take a look at that when you have a chance. I'll just share a little bit about myself, and then I mostly want to talk about our work and also touch on the fact that we haven't had any executions in North Carolina in almost 16 years. And so what does that mean about our work to push us farther across the abolition finish line? And I just want to acknowledge that some of you on this call live in abolition states, or in the case of California, in a state where the governor has imposed a moratorium. So I hope that what I'm sharing you will still find it relevant, because I think if we look at the death penalty in the broader context of transforming our criminal legal system, then what I'm going to share, particularly about the systemic racism that Kenneth already touched on, is truly relevant wherever you are and whatever issue you are focusing on. So my background is in clinical social work, and I worked on capital cases as a mitigation specialist for 15 years, meaning it was my job to learn about someone's life when they are facing the death penalty. And I did that by collecting records, by interviewing anyone who had any kind of a relationship with someone who was charged with capital murder, so teachers, family members, neighbors. And I learned the story of my clients' lives so that it could be shared via witnesses and attorneys, either at trial or to try to negotiate a life without parole plea, which in North Carolina, unfortunately, is the only alternative right now to a death sentence, is life without parole. So I did that for 15 years. Beginning in 2021, I continued to do mitigation work part-time, but I also took on the role as director of the Coalition for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. As of 2022, I'm now full-time, and really delighted to be doing this work that centers more on abolition work and grassroots organizing. We're a coalition of 16 partner organizations. Some of those organizations are large, like the North Carolina chapter of the ACLU, the North Carolina Council of Churches. Some are smaller, but focused on statewide work, like Emancipate NC. If you're not familiar with their work, I encourage you to look up their website. Also, the Poor People's Campaign of North Carolina, which has already been mentioned tonight or today. They're one of our coalition's partners as well. So 16 partner organizations, thousands of individuals across the state, all committed by the vision of ending the death penalty and creating a new vision of justice. We are focused on 3 core values: racial justice, restorative justice, and centering the voices of people most impacted. And Kenneth has already touched on some of those values. Restorative justice means something in opposition to, in contrast to, our retributive system. We want to ask who has been harmed, who can be held accountable for that harm, and how can healing take place with those parties, with those individuals, and with the community. We, as an organization, do not engage directly with restorative or transformative work within the legal system, although some of our coalition partners do. But we hold those values as a way to be with one another. As we are envisioning the world that we want to live in, we are living into it in how we operate as an organization. So we use a circle process for many of our meetings and the way we engage with one another. Racial justice. We know, as Kenneth has shared, that the systemic racism of the criminal legal system permeates throughout the entire system. And as long as we have the death penalty as the most harsh punishment, then it skews the entire system to a more racist and a more retributive process. We have more false confessions as long as we have the death penalty. And we have more of those folks who falsely confess are people of color. So in North Carolina, we've had, for example, 12 exonerations from death row, 12 innocent people that had been charged and sentenced to death. Of course, I believe there are more innocent people on the row than those 12, but 11 of those were people of color. Kenneth mentioned the percentage of people on death row. 60% of our 136 people sentenced to death in North Carolina are people of color in a state that's 25 to 30% people of color. And the statistics go on and on. A juror, for example, terrible systemic racism among jury practices. So half of those people sentenced to death in North Carolina were sentenced by either an all-white jury or a jury with only one person of color. So the Racial Justice Act was passed in 2010 and then later repealed by our General Assembly. We now have a much watered down version, although nearly all the 136 people on the row do have a Racial Justice Act claim. And that is the primary reason that we have a de facto moratorium and have not had any death sentences in almost 16 years because of those pending claims. We hope that judicial ruling may trickle down to more cases. There were 4 people already resentenced to life without parole because of the Racial Justice Act. There will be an evidentiary hearing in 2023, and we hope that may provide relief to others as well. Right now, we do not have a legislative path to abolition, but we are beginning to mount a campaign with our governor. And so we hope before Governor Cooper leaves office in 2024, he's prohibited from running for any more terms, that he might commute a number of death sentences to life without parole. So we are organizing towards that goal. We are organizing students, we are organizing faith communities. Our primary tool of organizing right now is a film called Racist Roots. And I really unpacks some of what I have shared about the systemic racism of the death penalty and connects the historic racial terror of lynching to our modern day practice of the death penalty. I know that Dr. Seth Koch was invited to speak with you all. Maybe he'll be able to do that at some point. He is one of the primary historians featured in the film. We actually are having 2 online showings of the film coming up in June. I'm going to put those registration links in the chat too. You're always welcome to reach out to me and I can share them with you by email as well. It's a 26-minute film. And we also have some facilitated discussion afterwards so that people have a way to respond to what they have seen. It's a powerful teaching tool. So I've spoken about our values of restorative justice and racial justice. The third value that I want to just touch on quickly is centering the voices of people most impacted. And I don't need to say much about it because Kenneth talked about that beautifully, but we don't just do that. We don't just pay lip service to having someone be in the room with us who has lived experience. I believe people with lived experience hold the solutions to transforming our system, and we must center their voices when it comes to the death penalty. So on our website, we have a people most proximate page, and that refers to people who are sentenced to death and their families, people who are exonerated and their families, and people who have lost loved ones to homicide and their families. Some of our staunchest abolitionists in North Carolina have suffered the loss of a loved one to homicide, and their stories are very powerful in helping people who might be not so inclined to believe in death penalty abolition. So on our website, there are all kinds of stories and beautiful photographs and ways that you can get involved. You can sign up for our email. You can follow us on social media. I really want to welcome you to join our movement. And especially if you don't have a death penalty in your state, then come help us abolish ours as well. I want to end with a favorite quote by Ella Baker, whom we like to claim as a North Carolinian. She, of course, did fabulous organizing from Shaw University. This may be only a dream of mine, but I think it can be made real. Thank you so much.
Wow, thanks so much, Noelle. And thanks so much, Kenneth. That was great hearing from the two of y'all. I hope and know that y'all have questions. So raise your hand, either use the reactions deal to raise your hand or physically raise your hand. And you can put a question in the chat, although that's the thing I'm least good at identifying. So let me get everyone on the screen. And yes, Robin Lloyd.
Yes, well, thank you. Thanks to both of you. This was a fascinating report. I'm just wondering about women in prison. And now you're both from North Carolina. Am I right in thinking that? Could you touch
That's
on
right.
that? Are any of them on death row? And and if so, are you trying to get them off?
Kenneth, do you have information about women in prison?
I do not have a direct number of the women in North Carolina who are on death row, but I can say this, that in our program, 50% of our clients are women. Their struggle is much more difficult than the men, and that's particularly because the women normally would have a child in tow, a child with a family member, or a child that is in the system that they are longing to get back with them. As that relates to men, men are more likely to be able to find housing by living with a woman, right? By having a girlfriend. Men are more susceptible to living in the outside elements and are less likely to become victims of crimes themselves for being poor and being homeless. We worked on a case with a woman by the name of April Barber, who was sentenced to life in prison. She was sentenced as a juvenile, and when the juvenile laws changed, we across North Carolina, who advocated an abolitionist, fought for her pardon, and she was pardoned about 6 months ago. We were there to when she was released, and we supported her with some reentry support donations that we have fundraised for, and we continue to work with her. She has a beautiful story, right, of release. She served over 30 years in prison, starting at the age of 15 years old. She was pregnant at the time. She's had a son. He's done well. So we are hopeful that stories like hers, right, can continue to get out. Maybe you have some information on a number of women.
I do, and oh my gosh, April Barber is so inspiring and incredible. I had the chance to meet her in April, and and the amount of time that it took to get her out. Those in power in our state could do so much more. They do the minimal only after they are prodded and prodded. But there are 2 women on North Carolina's death row at the women's prison in Raleigh, and at the men's prison at Central Prison, there is also a trans-identified woman as well. And just as Kenneth said, women are impacted differently. I would add that when men are incarcerated, it directly impacts women in their lives. And so even if a woman is not incarcerated herself, mass incarceration has a horrific ripple effect on women. And the numbers of women being incarcerated are dramatically increasing. I think it's the largest increase in a demographic group right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, George, Teresa. Noel, I lived in Durham for quite some time, and I was always baffled by the coalition's name, North Carolina Alternatives to the Death Penalty. And I know many of us would be in discussions, well, what is the alternative? We're against the death penalty, full stop. So what is this idea of alternatives that brings the coalition together?
I really appreciate that question, Teresa. And I think I failed to say that the organization became a nonprofit in 2012. And prior to that, it was the Coalition for a Moratorium, which I'm even less enthusiastic about than alternatives. If it were up to me, it would be a Coalition to Abolish. I think that it was a strategic decision at the time, perhaps to broaden our tent with coalition partners and maybe a politically strategic conversation as well. For me right now, the alternative in all of these issues that we're talking about is abolition. Right now, the only alternative is life without parole. But in as much as I do not support life without parole, if that is the worst punishment that we have for the worst homicide that we can think of, then there's going to be a ripple effect throughout the system. So whereas now, while we have the death penalty, folks can just plead to life without parole. If life without parole were the harshest sentence, then hopefully there would be a trickle down to lesser punitive responses. But the alternatives are based in restorative and transformative justice, as far as I'm concerned, and those are the values that we want to perpetuate.
Anyone else? Robin, I saw that you were unmuted, but did that mean you have a question? Oh,
Not
okay.
right now. No, thanks.
Okay. And Kenneth, did you have a response from Ms. Elamine?
No, but I will take another minute to discuss some of the issues as it affects our women. Again, systemically, the majority of those women are Black and come from poverty. And in each county, according to our research, and this is not just us saying it, we are working with research firms like the Urban Institute and UNC Charlotte to conduct this data, that in each of our counties, it is more difficult for the individuals that are returning to their home. So here in Charlotte, that means that if you are a native of Charlotte, like originally born and raised here, that these barriers are increased for you, even as it relates to one being formerly incarcerated, that's a woman that relocates here from somewhere else. And we have identified that with it being that when you return home and you return right back to low income areas, that it is just so much more likely to fall victim to not just crime, but crime-ridden areas where you are more likely to have interactions with police. So we are really focused on our women here who are formerly incarcerated, and we are trying to throw every resource that we can at them so that they can experience a method of upward mobility, which has been proven to positively impact their children. And that is one way that we have identified to be able to break that cycle generationally.
Thanks so much, Kenneth. Well, I want us to shift and hear updates from y'all. We know that there are good things happening in California. Philip mentioned that when he was checking in. So maybe we can hear from Philip or Joan. And Donna, we want to hear from anything going on in Massachusetts. You're not in Massachusetts, are you in Massachusetts? The Cape is Massachusetts.
Okay,
Robin.
I'm ready to speak. I
So
have a
you go
short,
ahead, Philip.
window here.
You've got like 2
In
minutes.
California, part of the reparations initiative, they are also concentrating on prison reform, and they want to either bring up the minimum wage that prisoners are paid for their work, which I think is basically a mistake, but also they want to
We're not hearing you, Philip.
just to work in California for this.
I'm not getting everything you're saying. So, oh, good Lord. Okay, well, we've lost
Why
Philip,
they're
but go ahead.
incarcerated.
We're not catching everything that you're saying there, Philip. Sorry. And I noticed that Elizabeth Evans has joined us. Elizabeth, please introduce yourself. Let us know your branch and where you are.
I apologize for being so late. My internet just went crazy when I tried to sign on. So I missed a good part of this. I'm with the Triangle branch of WILF, and I just wanted to tune in and to hear and gain some information. So
Glad you're
again,
here,
I
Elizabeth.
apologize. Yeah, thanks.
I recognize you now. Philip, do you want to try again, or we can put Joan on the spot if we must? Okay. Joan, do you know the update for California around this? If you don't, that's all right.
No, I don't have any new information except on the reparations, and that's not what we're talking about.
No problem then, thanks. Teresa?
Thank you, George. I just want to remind everyone, I'm one of the co-conveners of the Ending Mass Incarceration and the Death Penalty Subcommittee of the Advancing Human Rights Committee of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. And I say that to Noel and Kenneth because we do have a branch in the Triangle, Noel, which Elizabeth is a member, and we always invite our guests to join WILF. So George will probably drop the website in the chat. And Kenneth, men are welcome, as you can see from our member, Philip Cole. But I do want to remind everyone that we set up this series where we would go state by state. And this month was North Carolina focused, which is why Noel and Kenneth were invited. Last month, I believe we had Georgia. So we had people working on ending mass incarceration and the death penalty from Georgia. And we have a very, unfortunately, robust death penalty in Georgia. And the movement has been rather weak, Noel, but it's starting to revive itself through the Presbyterian Church. And so next month, Joan and Philip, we lost Philip, it looks like, but Joan and Philip, it will be California month. So George and I will assist with that by getting data and finding people that we know who might be able to be speakers from California. And then after California, we're asking Vermont to bring us the good news about how they were able to rid themselves of the death penalty. we do want to hear from Massachusetts because it looks like New England has been successful in ridding itself of the death penalty. And we do know that there are probably 22 or 23 states that have ridded themselves of the death penalty. And we want to make sure we get to that magic number so we can talk about ending the death penalty nationally. So I just wanted Noel and Kenneth to understand, welcome to the movement of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. And we would love to have you as members so that the work that you'll do in the Triangle branch and the work that Kenneth could do in the Southern Piedmont branch in Charlotte, that could really lift up this work statewide, since we have several branches in North Carolina, the Triangle, the Triad, Southern Piedmont are our branches in North Carolina. So we're so glad that you could be with us, Noel and Kenneth. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Teresa. And the Triangle is showed up pretty well here. There's Elizabeth and Ashley and Mary White. Hey, Mary. Glad that you were able to join us. We are committed to the 1 hour meeting. We've got 9 minutes left. I do want to hear a little bit from the other branches on. So Robin, if you have something you want to share for a minute or two, then Donna, and then Diane. Robin, Donna, and Diane. Robin, you're muted.
Yeah, I'd like to say that a couple of sessions back, we had a representative from Vermont on this show. And she talked about setting up an educational program in the prisons of entrepreneurship for women. And she has that going. And so my question for our two speakers, if there would be time enough, are you able to get programs into the prisons to help the people prepare for exiting into the real world?
That's a question for you, Kenneth.
Yes, and the only thing that slowed that down was COVID. So now that things are opening back up in the detention centers and the prisons, those relationships do exist. And since COVID, there has been more work done from the government as it relates to reentry. There are more programs and more funding that is available as it relates to reentry. So all of us who do reentry work expect for it to be more relationships between those on the outside and the prisons.
Thanks, Kenneth.
Thank you.
We need to hear briefly from Donna and then Diane.
Yes, here on Cape Cod, we are going to be in the 4th of July parade, and we're going to be handing out information on voting, on how to register to vote, on especially if how incarcerated or recently released people can register either in prison, jail, or afterward. The paths through the Attorney General's office or the Bureau of Prisons online, and they can get, so we'll be handing that out as part of our big push up until the elections in November, are to get everyone to vote so we can have a democratic situation rather than missing democracy the way we are now.
Thanks, Donna. That's great. Diane, is there anything you want to share?
Real quick, there's two things. It's about voters' rights for ex-felons. And the other thing is telephone calls for prisoners is a big issue. The huge, tremendous cost that they have to bear. So I'm gonna. That's just two issues that I know people are working on a lot here.
Thanks. So is there any update from the Triangle? I know there are several folks from the Triangle. Anything you want to share? Got a minute? Okay. Hang in there, Triangle. Glad you're here in full force. So we do have to thank Noel and Kenneth one more time. Thanks so much. I put in the chat a link for the join page. It's a little long and the word donate is in there, but when you go, you can renew or join a branch. And Kenneth, if you join, you'd be joining the Southern Piedmont branch. And Noel, you might be joining the Triangle branch. The next meeting is going to highlight California. Teresa, do you have suggestions or help us figure out a date for the next meeting?
Well, George, we agreed that we would meet on the second Monday of each month. So we should look at our calendars and figure out what that is. And so we have guest speakers, but all members of WILF in the US are welcome, Noel and Kenneth, which is why we have people from so many different states. Because there are branches all over the country. And those of us in our branches, we try to represent in this committee. So George, what's the date for the second Monday? We
It's
always
July
meet
12th.
July
2 o'clock.
12th at 2 p.m.
Yes, it's already on my calendar. I just forgot myself.
Well, that's good. And I do want to say to Robin and Joan, and we lost Philip, but California will be what we'll be talking about. So we'll be looking for someone to come to the meeting on July 12th with the statistics on California, the massive incarceration in the very big state of California. And I'm sure the numbers will reflect the same pretty much as they do in North Carolina and all over, because mass incarceration is a racist system which should be dismantled ASAP. And so we'll be focusing in on California. So if you want to do some research on that and try to see if there are any other branches in California that have information on it, whether in Fresno or San Diego or San Francisco, because North Carolina has a very high concentration of WILF members. California does, I mean. So Joan, we'll be counting on you, and I'll talk to you and Philip more about it. I do know a few people in California who might be able to assist on the speaker side.
I
Great.
just want to say the second Monday is July 11th.
Oh, you're right. Yes, July 11th. My apologies. I thought today was Tuesday. I'm really anxious to get to the end of this week, y'all.
Really? Yes, indeed.
I really was. I was totally looking at Tuesday. My
There you
apologies.
go.
Thanks for your grace and your
Thank you.
patience and sense of humor about everything.
And
All right,
your-
then I'll send y'all out the recording. Have a great week.
Thank
And
you.
Joan and George, be sure to send the chat because Kenneth and Noel put quite a bit of great information in the chat.
Yes, ma'am. I
Thank
sure
you.
will. All
and
right.
some of it really recent. So save the chat, everybody.
All right. I'll send it out with the recording. Peace.
Thank you so much.